Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to this first LinkedIn Live series on Supplier Diversity. So this is the first episode of a 5 LinkedIn Live series. The first in this first session, and I'll give you a bit of time to allow for people to join. But in this first session, we'll focus on where do you start your supplier diversity journey, and there are a few areas to consider. So I'll give it a minute, and then I will go ahead and talk through the agenda. So this is a short and sharp sessions. If you have any questions, please use the chat, or you can follow up as well with me via email, and you can see my email hopefully in the bottom of the screen. And also I'm happy to connect via LinkedIn as an alternative. So let's get started. So what are we going to discuss today? We'll start with exploring the common definition of supplier diversity, and then take it further by exploring the different dimensions of supplier diversity. We'll also touch on what are the main corporate drivers for launching such program, and then we finish around where do you actually start to launch a supplier diversity program. And even if you already started one, actually, do you have some of those key foundations that I'm going to talk through in place? So that's the agenda for this session. So let's start with what is a common or classic definition of supplier diversity. So supplier diversity is a proactive business strategy that promotes the inclusion of diverse-owned businesses in procurement activities across your company. And the diverse suppliers or businesses that are at least 51% owned, managed, and controlled by a traditionally underrepresented group. So often you will hear reference to a women-owned business or ethnic minority-owned business, for example. But I find this is quite a limited remit to supplier diversity. Right? Supplier diversity is much more than that. So let's explore the different dimension of supplier diversity. So it starts with inclusive procurement team and processes. I really believe this is the key foundation to supplier diversity. It starts internally with how inclusive your procurement team is, how inclusive your procurement processes are, right? Then within that, it's also start with the leaders. So having inclusive leaders will really empower the team. Those inclusive leaders in procurement will play a key role in fostering an environment where everyone feels valued and heard. They will intentionally build the diverse teams, and they will champion diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the procurement journey and into the supply chain. So we start at the top with the leaders. Then within the procurement team, it's also essential to ensure all employees are supported and they have D&I knowledge. So it's where providing ongoing support and resources to enhance your team understanding of DEI principles and the application to procurement. So it's the general level of awareness around DEI, but then how also does it apply to procurement? As well, knowledge empowers team members to challenge biases, also embrace fair practices, and therefore create an inclusive supply chain. So it starts not only with inclusion in day-to-day communication with colleagues and suppliers, but also ensuring that there is a D&I lens being applied into the procurement process to really remove or eliminate as much as possible the biases in decision-making with suppliers, with also stakeholders. And that's where we are now going into the inclusive procurement processes, which again is a key part of the supplier diversity initiative and inclusive supply chain. So how do you integrate inclusive practices into your procurement processes? So from supplier evaluation, supplier selections to then contract management, inclusivity should be a core consideration, ensuring that your current processes are inclusive, and then will facilitate contracting with SMEs. So, for example, as an SME, you want to, or when engaging with SMEs, you want to ensure your contract terms will cater for their size, their resources. So what you might ask around liability, warranty in your contract terms might be different for SME to $1 billion revenue organizations, for example. But it's also adapting your tendering process or request for proposal process to ensure it's accessible to SMEs. So one, they have a chance to compete, and two, that you recognize the impact of resources and time for SMEs to participate in such processes. So effectively, to cut the red tape where possible, to facilitate engaging with SMEs. Those are just examples, and there is more. Those are topics we'll explore in the future LinkedIn Lives. So it starts with, so in terms of the dimension of supplier diversity, there's contracting with diverse suppliers. Then there is also looking inward at how inclusive the procurement team is and how inclusive your procurement processes, are. Another dimension is to then hold your key suppliers, specifically your key suppliers as a starting point, to high D&I standards. Ideally to the same standards you hold yourself accountable internally. It might be around representation of employees at various levels. It might be on your D&I efforts or initiatives that you have internally. You expect your suppliers to have in place as well if they want to contract or collaborate with you. It might be some specific standards, accreditation, for example, such as expecting your suppliers to be disability confident, to ensure they're inclusive in their own processes, from recruitment to employee engagement and support throughout their tenure in the organization. So those are specific examples, and again, there are more. The point here is to hold your key suppliers accountable. That's then part of your contract management processes, how you manage their performance. It's not only about delivering on financially or operationally, it's also delivering on DEI standards that you're expecting from them. And on the other hand, it's then obviously engaging with your SMEs and collaborating with them on sharing knowledge. We know SMEs have less HR resources when it comes to specifically HR D&I practices. So how can you support them? How can you collaborate with them and share knowledge, share best practice? So you support the creation of an inclusive supply chain. And that's really the extra dimension of supplier diversity, is as an organization, you can positively influence DEI in your industry, in your supply chain, and ultimately in our society. So there are really those different dimensions coming to play in inclusive supply chain and supplier diversity. So now let's move to what are the main drivers for launching such initiatives. There are a few, but ultimately more and more companies recognize the importance of fostering diversity, both for the sake of building a positive culture and to drive competitive bottom line results. That's another driver for supplier diversity. But one of the most common drivers has been survey done on that, specifically in the US, where supplier diversity is even more advanced than in Europe, as it actually started from the USA, such practices. And then one of the most common drivers is the alignment with the corporate DEI goals. So it's how do you align your DEI strategy internally to actually such program, which often is an extension of internal goals. So that's the number one driver. It's part of the overall global DEI strategy. Another driver is the corporate social responsibility agenda. And more organizations now are linking supplier diversity, the role of procurement, to support not only sustainability, but social impact. So how you impact your local communities, how you positively impact the customers you serve, and that's a key agenda now as part of CSO. The third common drivers is to improve your supply chain competitiveness. So it's back to my point earlier about contracting with diverse suppliers, SMEs. Often those organizations that have different background, different experiences, different skills level can help you drive innovation, but also make your supply chain more resilient. So you're less reliant on the usual classic suppliers and actually have a breadth of experience, skills, services, capabilities across your supply chain, which then in return might also help around creating competitive tension, managing your costs, on top of driving innovation and creative solutions. And then the fourth drivers, which is customer requirements, your clients and what they might be expecting from you, or it could be government regulation, compliance. So more and more organizations realize that their clients are now holding them accountable on DE&I, and therefore they want to ensure that they have the right practices in place internally, with not only for their employees but also for their own supply chain. So it's getting ahead of what clients might expect by being proactive in creating this inclusive supply chain. So those are the most common drivers. So we've talked through the different dimensions of supply diversity. What are the main drivers for such initiative? So now where do you start? So a key starting point is defining why. Right? Why does it matter for your organizations? It will be different, slightly different for each organization. For example, if you're in the construction industry or if you're in the creative marketing, industry, you might have different drivers around supply diversity. The key is to define that internally, and why does it matter for your organization, for your brand, for your supply chain? How does it align to some of those key corporate goals? So starting with why, because that will then not only help you as a procurement team or D&I team, but help you with stakeholders engagement, stakeholder communication, getting their buy-in and support, and also with your supply chain. So that's step one. Then another key steps. So step two is what I've mentioned at the beginning: inclusive procurement team. That's really a key foundation. Before challenging or supporting your suppliers, it starts internally around your team having the basic DE&I knowledge, understanding of how bias can impact decision making, but also in their role to engage with diverse suppliers and how to manage related conversation with stakeholders. So that's another key foundation: the why, and then ensuring your team is inclusive and have the right tools and guidance around the E&I to then be able to engage with stakeholders and suppliers. Once you've got clear why defined, you're working on having an inclusive procurement team, then it's almost taking a step back and understanding what is the current state. So how inclusive your procurement processes are. Where are the potential risks when it comes to D&I in the supply chain? Where are on the flip side, where are the opportunities? What does it mean in terms of client engagement? Or what are the client requirements? You might already be working with SMEs, but you have data to really understand the current landscape. So it's really doing an assessment internally of where are we in terms of SMEs, in terms of processes, in terms of supplier engagement, our client expectation, but even also looking at what about in the industry, what are my competitors doing in this space. So that's a great starting point. You know why you want to do it. You have an inclusive procurement team. Then before taking further actions, you also understand your starting points. So then in the future, you can start measuring progress and the impacts of your initiatives. And then a key point around the starting such initiative is establishing some clear goals that are aligned to your overall organization, the E&I strategy, and just overall corporate goals. And that's where collaboration is absolutely essential. So collaboration between the D&I professional, with procurement team, with CSR professional, just HR in general, or key stakeholders as well, that can influence procurement or buying decisions. So working hand in hand with them and all your stakeholders to align procurement practices with your organization diversity goals is really a key point as you start the program. So having those clear goals aligned to your overall corporate or organization objectives with collaboration with the right stakeholders will then support the initiative. So those are the 4 key starting points. So defining the why, having an inclusive procurement team, taking a step back, understanding your current state, before then establishing those clear goals aligned to your overall organization objectives. Once you've got that in place, then it's time to really focus on action planning, and those are the points we'll discuss in future LinkedIn Live over the next few weeks. So to finish now, in summary, supplier diversity is much more than contracting with diverse suppliers. Procurement teams have a key role to play to influence the E&I externally. They start internally by having an inclusive procurement team and inclusive procurement processes. And then understanding this current state and being clear on why it matters and what you're trying to achieve in collaboration with your stakeholders will give you some really strong foundation to start your supplier diversity journey. So we've touched on a few points here. I hope it was valuable. And this is now the end of this LinkedIn Live. This might have triggered more questions or more thoughts. And again, please get in touch via LinkedIn or via emails. You can see my email here at the bottom. Happy to share knowledge, exchange knowledge with you, answer any questions you may have. And the next LinkedIn Live will be on what are the most common challenges to deliver your supplier diversity strategy and create an inclusive supply chain, and how to overcome them. So thank you for attending, and again, happy to connect if you have any question. Have a good afternoon.